my experiences become your adventure. I want to thank all y'all who subscribed to my channel and decided to join me on my YouTube journey. And always remember to hit that bell notification so you won't miss my next video. Well, let's go explore the Georgia Museum of Agriculture and Historic Village. The Georgia Museum of Agriculture and Historic Village is under the direction of Abraham Baldwin Agricultural College, located here in Tifton, Georgia. We will visit the Spinks Exhibit Hall Museum, explore some amazing structures, and we will ride on this amazing steam train. We first have to obtain our daily pass at the country store. Inside the country store, you will find many unique items and souvenirs. Here's some local Georgia-produced honey. Here's the Museum and Historic Village's t-shirt. Here's some cornmeal that was ground at the museum's grist mill. And with the summer heat beating down on you, here's an ice cream parlor. My ticket today cost me just $12 to explore this 95-acre historic village. It's Saturday, and it's the only day you can ride the train. You can ride all day with today's admission. If you decide to park at the country store on Saturdays, you'll have two options available to reach the historic village. One way is to take a short train ride to the train depot on Mainstreet. The other way is to walk through the playground area located beside the country store and follow this short, winding, wooded path. Make sure that before you reach the railroad crossing, you look to your right and explore the old moonshine still. The path ends at the grist mill. I decided to drive around and park at the parking lot that faces Interstate 75. This is the preferred place to park if you attend on a day other than Saturday when the train is not operating. Located at the parking lot is this amazing old steam engine. Let's step inside the Spinks Exhibit Hall. This spacious area is the hall's atrium. Located on the north side of the hall is the Cordell Conference Center. There is also the gallery. On display today is the exhibit Special Art from Special Folks, The Art of Autism 2. This hall is named after Ford Spinks, a Tifton native who was once a Georgia senator. Because of his leadership, on July 4th, 1976, the Georgia Agorama was born, which later became the Georgia Museum of Agriculture and Historic Village. The Historic Village displays often have curators that share a little of their history, and the Spinks Exhibit Hall Museum is no exception. Our tour guide today is Miss Truelove.
The oldest things in the museum is a trough used to give water to a cow, horse, or mule. This is buckboard. And when I describe this, usually I'll say it's the truck of the 1800s because that's the only way they had to go to town. They have a horse or mule pulling it. And I call this the ignition switch. They tap the animal to get them going. And this is the brake, which would press against the wheel to stop it from moving. It's called a buckboard, but I call it the truck of the 1800s. This is a ball cypress. It's called a sinker ball cypress because they had gotten it from the bottom of the Apalachicola River.
Wow.
And the reason it was called a sinker ball cypress is because it could not survive the float down the river. And it was so big that to get it out from the bottom, they had to cut it at the bottom of the river. And I've been told it's worth about $17,000 by people that actually work in this kind of business. And they managed to get this one out of the Apalachicola River. What people don't realize is that all over the United States, there are these kind of logs at the bottom of rivers and lakes. This is a mail doggy, 1904. Mr. Hancock started driving this. He delivered to 16 mailboxes, and it covered 20 miles to deliver to 16 mailboxes because houses were so far apart. This is actually a farmer that had two mules that he could use to pull his wagon and go hunting. These were the guns they used to shoot different animals, like deer, rabbits, squirrels.
That's where they kept their dogs?
Yeah, they put the dogs right here. The guns would go right here. And where they would put whatever they shot, and they could put a deer on top. This is a cotton compactor that keeps the cotton packed together and easier to ship or transport. And this is one thing I love is I have students don't realize that cotton has seed in it and how hard the work was before we had a cotton gin. But this would be family and friends sitting around picking out the seed that are like popcorn seed. They would have to pick out every seed in the cotton, and that's why most farmers didn't have but like 4 bales of cotton a year. This is the cotton gin that Eli Whitney invented, and he did not get the patent for it, so he didn't make a lot of money off of it. He was an inventor, and his idea came about because he saw a cat scratching a string and pulling it with its nails, like my nails, and that gave him the idea of getting the seeds out of the cotton. So he had this, these are little needles, our light is not good in here, but this thing would go round and round and pull the seed out. In 1897, that was when they first started getting these, and you can see the difference in the, these have the rough edges, so you know they did these by hand. You can look at this one and see the real even edges, and you can tell it came from a sewing machine. It was sold in 1936. This is how you crank it.
So you had to manually do it too, huh?
Imagine doing
Oh
that?
boy.
Yeah, that's the heyday of tobacco, when it was just really big time. This is the inside of a warehouse in Tifton. It's now luxury apartments. On the end, it has a restaurant. This is tobacco that was sold in the warehouse. This is the inside of the warehouse during the time they were selling in that warehouse. That's my granddaddy walking toward us with the big stomach and the overalls and the tall hat.
Wow.
And I remember going and sitting on the tobacco bales and hearing them call out all those numbers. And the numbers meant they could get the top price, they could get a second price, or they could get just not sell it at all. The second price would be government price. After the Civil War, people needed jobs. And so the farmers started using their pine trees to gather sap, the turpentine from the pine trees. And they did it in different ways. They would cut a shape into it so it would go into whatever container they had. Right there they had a little pot, and then they collect the turpentine. Their way of life was they were furnished a place to live. This is from 1878, a log cabin from 1878. It's been redone. I'm thinking it probably had a dirt floor instead of a wood floor. But mostly they were given a place to live and money for the company store to get their food. And this is as a result of cutting the pine tree all the way up, they would have a cat face. The tree would have to be cut down and sold. So there was double value in having turpentine trees. Here's one of the trees with the cat face on it. It's laying down.
Wow.
Sometimes I take people's pictures sitting on it. And that's some of the products that turpentine is used for. And we sell some of that in the country store. So this tractor was actually in a movie, and it was in Parrott, Georgia, and I had never heard of Parrott, Georgia until this weekend. We went through Columbus, and we passed through Parrott, Georgia, and I thought, oh my goodness, there's the one that they had this movie filmed in Parrott, Georgia with this tractor.
I want to send out a big thank you for that excellent tour of the Fred R. Spinks Exhibit Hall Museum. We're going to start our historic village walk at this cabin, which was built in the 1850s by James C. Sumner. It was once located in northwest Tift County and was donated to the historic village by Miss R.L. Clyatt. This structure is an example of a traditional homestead. This basically means that this is how a farmhouse normally appeared around the 1870s, before the railroad, turpentine, and lumber industries came to town. After leaving the Sumner Clyatt Cabin, we're going to head south to another traditional homestead. We first pass by what is called the Opry Shelter. This is one of the large venues that can be rented for an event. We continue our walk through this area called Destination Ag. This is where a lot of educational programs are provided to visiting guests. It has a few shelters and even has this playground and picnic area. Located by the shelters are these planting plots and these geese. All those plants in the plots need to be pollinated, so here's the historic village's bee population. This is the Clyatt Cabin, which was built in 1886. This reconstructed farm represents a complete traditional homestead. One of the cool things about the historic village is the ability to explore and discover small details. This is a kettle used for making cane syrup. There's usually a curator located at most exhibits, but sometimes you may have to wait for them while they're taking a break. Crossing back over the bridge, we come to this rural community. This is Simon's Cabin and James' Kitchen. The cabin was built around 1845, and the adjoining kitchen was built by Minister James Gibbs. Through the breezeway, we can see some more of those geese. Next door to Simon's Cabin and James' Kitchen is the Sandhill Schoolhouse. It was built around 1895 near here in a town called Tai. And check out that pot-belly stove. That chalkboard is authentic. Teacher, can I be excused to go to the restroom? This is Wesley Chapel. It was built around 1882 in northeast Dougherty County, Georgia. From the traditional homestead area, we will now make our way to the progressive homestead area. This is the Gibbs house. It was built by Allen Gibbs around 1896 near Tai, Georgia. Mr. Gibbs had 14 children by 2 wives. This house showcases a prime example of a progressive farmstead. Because of advancements in farming equipment to produce more crops, the home can now be painted and even have a modern stove instead of a fireplace to cook. Located out back is the smokehouse.
And a chicken coop at the Gibbs house.
That's right, this chicken coop, this sugarcane press, and this 4-hole outhouse. I just called for help. She just called for dinner. Here's a tip if you ever visit the historic village. Behind the Gibbs house is this faucet, which you can splash some cold water on you on those summer hot days. Across from the Gibbs house is the Gibbs farm. The Georgia Museum of Agriculture in a historic village is so immersive. It's just like walking back in the late 1800s. There's some old plows, an old wagon, and a mule. All right, mule, let's go plow that field. This is the Cravey House. It was built in 1880 by Benjamin Cravey. It was moved here from Turner County. The locals here at the historic village also refer to this place as Miller's Cabin because of it being located by the Grist Mill. No fishing, please. And now, located by Miller's Cabin, is the Grist Mill. Corn is placed in the hopper, it's ground by the grindstone, and it comes out as meal and is sold at the country store. Here's a look out at the Grist Mill's creek. And over here is the entrance of the path that leads back to the country store. This bridge takes us to a hidden spot. It's the Langdale Nature Center. There was this cage where a possum was sleeping or maybe playing dead. He woke up. Inside the center you can find some fish, some turtles, and some Madagascar hissing cockroaches. I hear that train whistle. Remember to continue watching to write on that piece of history. This area of the historic village is known as the Industrial Complex. So this right here is what they slide the logs down on. This sawmill is powered by a frick burner and an 1892 Atlas steam engine. Big belts are routed throughout the sawmill and drive the big saw blades. This sawmill was typical for a small sawmill operation in the 1890s. They sometimes demonstrate the operation of this sawmill. Beside the sawmill is the Turpentine Still. The barrels you see were made by a skilled worker known as a cooper. Turpentining came to South Georgia in the early 1870s. If you remember back at the museum, the pine trees were milked of their pine sap. Then the sap would have been brought to a place like this. Over at the blacksmith shop, I can hear some hammering. Greg the blacksmith invited us to get up and close as he forged some steel. So that blows air?
Yes, we're just moving air up through the bottom of the fire.
And that gets everything a lot hotter.
It does. Before you could have any other profession in the town, virtually, you had to have a smith because they made the chisels for stonemasons and woodworkers. They sharpened and set the saw teeth. They made all the hammers and chisels for the masonry for the grist mill. They did all the shoeing. So really, I'd heard that without a smith, the town would basically shut down within a week or so. And that's probably the case.
By the blacksmith is Variety Works. In the back of the variety shop looks like where the woodworker lived. They produced all kinds of woodworking projects, including doors, blinds, molding, and I am sure furniture. Beside Variety Works is the Commissary. This structure was built in 1889 and was brought here in 1974. The Commissary was a store that provided needs of workers in places like the sawmills and the turpentine businesses. They usually use scripts or tokens given by their employee to make their purchases. From the industrial complex, we now walk into Main Street. Located in the rear of the print shop is a telephone museum. I was told there's over 500 telephones on display in here. There's many different styles of phones that were used throughout history. There's even this old phone booth. The phones in this museum were donated by Danny and Beverly Sterling in 2022. Danny was the president of the Plant Telephone Company. This photo is of James Perry Gleaton, who founded the Plant Telephone Company in Georgia back in the 50s. The print shop is located in the front part of the building. The print shop and the telephone museum is located in a building that was built in 1886. It used to be an old commissary building. There are vintage printer presses in the print shop that date back to 1872. A print shop enabled the town to receive the news and gossip that occurred in its community. We're going to continue exploring Main Street. This building contains a feed and seed, mercantile, drugstore, and a unique upstairs lawyer's office. This is a reproduction of an early 1900 feed and seed store. The nearby farmer could come to town on Main Street and buy some seeds to grow his crops. It was the point of contact to order tons of stuff out of the Sears Roebuck catalog. There's even a veterinarian clinic in the back which would have been owned by Dr. Portavant. Here you could bring your farm animals and your family dog to get healed. And how about that pot belly stove? Next door is the drugstore. The druggist had to mix his own compounds to make medicine. A drugstore would also sell items like combs, toilet articles, cigars, and even paint. The historic Villages drugstore is also a great place to stop and get something cold to drink or even an ice cream. Through the drugstore, you will find the Mercantile. It is used for a rental for special occasions. Above the drugstore is this unique lawyer's office.
Judge Sweat was a judge over in Waycross, Georgia. He managed to get his law license without ever going to law school. And we know he got it because it's right there.
This is where the barber shop is.
Barber shops are where men get together and tell lies, chew and spit and do all the things they can't do in front of their women folks.
Prentice Herman Polk, head of the Tuskegee Institute's Department of Photography in 1938, took this picture of George Washington Carver in his greenhouse. Upstairs, in a room by the lawyer's office and the barber shop, is this full-scale depiction. Located behind Main Street is this area known as Straight from the Farm. This shed contains 12 bays of agricultural artifacts that were donated to the museum to be preserved. History is only made once. Located beside the Spinks exhibit hall, where the museum is located, is the Tift House. This was an upper-class home that once was in the town of Tifton, Georgia.
Well, this is the home of Tifton, Georgia's founding father, Henry Harding Tift. And this is his wife, Bessie Willingham Tift. They had the house built in 1887. It was in downtown Tifton, and it was moved out here on this site in the early 1980s. Down here, he saw all this land that was growing these virgin trees. He buys several thousand acres of this land, sets up a sawmill, starts cutting it down into lumber that he can sell to other people. And as we say, the rest is history. When you see this house, you know this man made a lots of money off of those trees. The wallpaper throughout the house, it is silk wallpaper. It's very near what the original did look like.
The Tift House contains so many unique items, like these religious paintings of angels, this harpsichord, this curly pine cabinet, these personalized dishes, this high-end stove, and a telephone. Upstairs, this has to be a young girl's room, and this spinning top has to be a boy's. Leave a comment if you know what kind of bed this is. Here's the indoor toilet. These curved corners look like they should be on a steamboat that Mr. Tift was an engineer on. This building was once located in Boston, Georgia. It was the doctor's office of Dr. Van. If you couldn't pay, you better pay that doc with some chickens or some vegetables or just anything. This wheelchair is like the one used by President FDR. This is Dr. Van's satchel and some of his supplies. This is an old dental chair and some dental tools. Here's the examining table and some surgical gadgets. This fella probably didn't pay the doctor. On the north side of the doctor's office is a herbal garden. They are still in the process of developing this herb garden. There's a sundial. An herbal garden seems fitting here by the doctor's office. The building beside the doctor's office used to stand in Irwin County, Georgia. It was built around 1909. Let's walk through the Masonic Lodge. Those must be Masonic ceremonial globes. This used to be the Abba Masonic Hall. This is looking out at the doctor's office. And this is looking south at the cotton gin. Cool potbelly stove. So now, let's make our way over to the cotton gin. I like the fact that you can explore the buildings around the historic village. That looks like a wagon that's being loaded with cleaned, processed cotton. This is an 1886 Loomis gin. It has 80 saws that are used to gin the cotton. The gin is powered by a Frick 110 horsepower steam engine. There's a building beside the cotton gin. It is called the Costume Shop. I was wondering if that's where the live actors get into their costumes. Now, we're going to make our way to the train depot on Main Street. It's the last structure we will explore, and then we will ride on the steam train around the park. This building was built in the late 1800s or early 1900s. In the train depot, there's this model of a train. And this cool picture. These look like tools that are used on the railroad. Checkers, anyone? This appears to be the cargo loading dock for the train cars. All we're waiting on now is for the boiler to be filled with water. This is a 1917 Vulcan Ironworks steam locomotive. This train burns diesel to heat the water in the boiler. Billy, who is one of the engineers, will tell us a little history about this train.
It was first built for Hardaway Contracting Company in Columbus, Georgia. So for his first job, he went to North Carolina, working power dams and everything like that. And then he came back down to West Virginia and just came back on down and wound up in South Carolina in a state park for about 10 years. And then Paul Carmichael bought it, gave it for 3 years, and then he sold it to Agarama, which at that point in time it was not working. They had decided to have the boiler redone. had to have it work all together.
I got to blow that whistle. So let's sit back and take a ride on this historic steam locomotive. After just a short stop at the Country Store train depot, we continue through the forest back to the Mainstreet depot to complete our ride. Well, I hope y'all enjoyed my video today. If you did, make sure you give me a big thumbs up. And always remember, your adventure awaits with the Denovator.